excited to talk with you today about how to have engaging and effective meetings. Just to get you warmed up, this is going to be a really interactive experience today. So I hope you've had your coffee. And I'd also love it if you could use the chat box to just chat in what you're hoping to learn today. Just in a few words, a sentence, just what you're hoping to cover. And we'll take a look at that and hopefully meet your objectives for today. As I said, this is going to be a fully interactive experience. So there are a lot of different ways that you can interact with us. So participation is strongly encouraged, and there'll be a few different ways. So you can type questions that you have from us, and if we have time at the end to get to Q&A, we'll definitely do that. And if not, we can email with you offline if we don't get to your question. But even more specifically, there'll be a couple of different types of polls that you can answer. There'll be polls that launch in GoToWebinar, and so you'll be able to click on your screen and answer a question. And then there'll be polls. We're trying a new polling feature, so you're part of an experiment today. There will be polls that you can answer offline. So there'll be a link that we will send out in the chat box, and you will click on that link to go to a separate site to answer some of the poll questions. There are links sprinkled throughout the presentation to more information and resources on particular topics. Unfortunately, don't try and click on your screen today, but they're not active in GoToWebinar. But they will be active in a PDF version of this presentation that we post to the PCPCI website later today. And last but not least, make sure you enter your audio PIN. So if you are tuned in to audio via your telephone, make sure you enter your audio PIN. It's a 2-digit number. Don't use the one on your screen. That's mine and probably won't work for you. But you should have a 2-digit audio PIN. It's bolded underneath the dial-in number. If you want to enter that right now and hit pound, so pound your audio PIN and then pound again, that will allow us to unmute your line later, and we're going to be asking for volunteers to speak up and share examples. So go ahead and enter your audio PIN now in anticipation of that happening. And I'll just warn you, if you're someone who's worked with the Institute before and I see your name on the list, I might call on you, so you can't hide. So make sure you're thinking about a good example throughout this. Before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about the Patient-Centered Primary Care Institute. The chances are good that you've heard of the Institute if you've joined the webinar today, but in case you haven't, it is a public-private partnership that was launched in 2012 with the support of the Oregon Health Authority, specifically the PCPCH program, to get technical assistance and resources out to practices working on the patient-centered primary care home or medical home model of care. We do lots of stuff that helps engage practices across the state, a series of online learning modules, webinars like these, a website, different kinds of trainings. Just to look at what's coming up, each month, the last Tuesday of the month, we do a resource orientation. You email info@pcpci.org to register for that. It's just a tour of the website. We found that people really like to have someone talk them through the resources that are available, and it can be kind of overwhelming to figure out where to start. So if you have new staff members or are new yourself or would just like a refresher, feel free to join us for that. And then there are 2 upcoming webinars that you can join. The first, I don't know if any of you have experienced metric fatigue in your organizations, but if you have, I suspect that you have, hop on to share your experience on an upcoming listening session that QCore is holding. It's going to be an interactive discussion, but held through webinar so folks around the state can participate, just to kind of talk about you know, all the different metrics that clinics are responsible for tracking and reporting on and improving, and sort of what that situation looks like now and what it might look like in the future if we were to align some of those metrics and sort of narrow the focus a bit more. There's also an Institute webinar in November on tobacco use. We're inviting our colleagues from the OHA Public Health Department to come and talk about public health resources available for primary care providers around identifying tobacco use. As I mentioned, we are a partner of the PCPCH program. The PCPCH program is defined by 6 core attributes with specific standards and measures that practices can attest to be recognized as a primary care home in Oregon. You can learn more about the program at primarycarehome.oregon.gov. All right, so all the front matter is handled, and here we are at the actual show. So my name is Kate Elliott. I'm a program director at QCore, working specifically on the Patient-Centered Primary Care Institute. And what led me to leading a webinar on this topic today is the fact that I host and attend a lot of meetings. My younger sister, when she doesn't know how to describe what I do, just says I'm a business lady, which I don't know really about that, but I think it's because of the amount of meetings that I go to. I also have a lot of experience training healthcare staff and doing things like staff orientations and retreats. So leading groups around sharing, learning, and communicating with each other. And I like to have fun while doing it, so I'm happy to share some of my experience doing that with you guys today. And I'm joined by Shelly Bettner, who's a consultant with QCore, who's going to introduce herself.
Thanks, Kate. Shelly Bettner. It's okay, you pronounce it slightly wrong. It's okay. Everybody does.
Thank you.
And just to let you know, I did ask Kate to make my head a little bit smaller, but she wouldn't do it. My head's not really that big in real life, okay? I have been a healthcare professional for 15 years, and I have probably spent at least 50% of the last 10 years of my working life and time in meetings, either participating or leading meetings, mostly leading in the last 5 or 6 years. So have also spent quite a bit of time studying people who do this well and taking lots of feedback along the way so I can perfect that meeting time. And I will warn you that I am a sucker for having fun, so there's going to be a lot of themes along that line that you'll hear from me during the rest of this webinar. Okay, so we have 3 objectives that we put out ahead of time, and hopefully this is why you're tuning in, so we can help you meet these. The first one is what makes a meeting good and not so good. What are some strategies for meeting organizational needs without having a meeting? So we'll get a little creative with some suggestions there. And then finally, we're going to prepare to share some resources with you for how to facilitate productive and energizing meetings.
All right, it's poll time.
So we want to start the session by asking you guys to participate and answer these questions. I think we're going to do one at a time. Is that right? Okay. Okay, so the first question we have is, what types of meetings do you lead or participate in?
Okay, so it looks like all of you participate in all the meetings, which is unsurprising. So this was a select all that applies. So 71% of you, large committee meetings, 88% staff meetings, nearly everyone attends team meetings of some sort. Fewer of you, but still almost 60% one-on-one meetings with direct reports, and then one-on-one meetings with peers. So as we suspected, everyone is attending all the meetings, so that's good. That is good. All right, next question.
Okay, so what brought you here today? What are you hoping to get out of the session? And we have some options for you there in the poll.
All right. Most of you are leading meetings and wanting to improve them, so that's good to know that you're in charge of a meeting and you want to make it better. Your colleagues who participate in meetings with you, thank you for being here today. And none of you have nothing better to do, so we'll make sure that we make really good use of your time during the webinar today. All right, one last question.
Okay, so what's your comfort level leading meetings? Since most of you are here and want to learn how to lead meetings better, please rate your comfort.
Okay, it looks like most people are falling in the middle here, having some mixed feelings. The 20% of the rock stars, so really if you were a 4 or 5, I'm expecting that later when we're asking for volunteers that you will step up because we'd love to hear all of your great ideas. And then for those in the 3s and 2s and 1s, we hope you learn lots of stuff today that helps you feel a little more comfortable with leading meetings. Okay, so now let's transition back to our slides. And it's an absolute miracle that we closed the poll and it went right back to our slides. Thank you, technology. So we have another poll. Now this is the one that you're going to go offline to. So this is experimenting time. So there should be a button in the chat box for you to click to go to an external website, or a link in the chat box for you to go to an external website, Poll Everywhere. And when you click on that link, it'll take you to this question. And if you're one of the first 25 people to respond, we'll be able to get your information into the question. So hopefully folks are able to get that link and share some of their ideas about how would you describe meeting culture in your organization. So when you think about your organization and meetings, often there's sort of a culture or pattern that we fit into leading meetings. And what would you say it's like in your organization? All right, so there's the link up on your screen too. If you are having trouble accessing it through chat, you're part of a great experiment. Go ahead and write in and tell us how you would describe meeting culture in your organization. We've received word from Command that you need to copy and paste the link, it doesn't hyperlink, into your browser. Really making sure that you drank your coffee this morning. So you can type in the link that's up at the top, or oh, and a different question is coming up. Please stand by. It should be back. Try refreshing your page and putting the link in again. We've received word from Command that the correct poll question is up. So it's now a race to see who is the savviest technology person to answer this poll. We'll wait a couple more seconds and then maybe we'll move on to Plan B. Oh, yes! We have liftoff. Keep them coming. Ooh, supportive. That's nice. That's really good. Whoever said supportive, make sure you pipe up later when we ask you to unmute your line and share. So not a lot of action. Policies and procedures around meeting etiquette. Interesting. All right, so not totally unexpected, right, Shelley? I think that's pretty much what we thought folks were going to say. All right, thank you for participating in that grand experiment. I think we have the technology figured out, so the 2 other polls in this presentation I think are going to go seamlessly. So moving on.
So one more thing we want you to do before we start in on the meat and potatoes. We want you to think of a meeting, visualize the meeting in your head. You're walking down the hallway. You're having emotions about this meeting that you're about to go into. You maybe have some idea of the agenda and the facilitator's experience and methods. And I want you to put that thought in your head and keep it there. We're going to be asking you to pull that back out a little bit later. Okay, so nothing better to start the day than a little Dilbert, right? So I have a high degree of suspicion that the creator of Dilbert, whoever he is, has spent a good majority of time in meetings himself and in corporate culture, because he is spot on with his humor. What makes meeting a dirty word? A lot of you said that meeting, the culture in your organization around meetings is not terribly wonderful. I think that there are several things that can contribute to that. I'm sure you have your own ideas. Meetings for status updates, I think we've probably all been there before. If it's an FYI, then certainly probably not a need to have a meeting. Tradition is hard to break. There's always been meetings from the beginning of time, I think, when they were probably inventing fire. But honestly, as things get more complex and challenging, especially in healthcare, I think that the tendency is to just throw more meetings at things. That goes along with the lack of options or perception that there aren't any other options to meetings, and we're going to talk about what those are later. And then the last one, no time to plan or reconsider. So a good meeting does take a good deal of preparation for it to be effective and for it to be a valuable use of everybody's time. Or to reconsider, do we actually need this meeting? Maybe it's a regularly scheduled meeting, and it's just more comfortable to keep it on the books, but honestly there's not enough agenda to cover the hour. It's just not a good use of people's time. So going through all those thought processes. So what we've done today is we have broken the meeting into 3 stages, pun intended, to go along with our theme of 3 acts. So Act 1 is before the meeting. What do we need to do to prepare for the meeting? One of the most important acts in my mind. Act 2, during the meeting. How do we make sure that everybody's engaged and participatory? And then after the meeting, how do we make sure that people have the action items that they need and everything is followed up on to bring people back to more meetings? So Act 1, before the meeting. So we want you to remember the 3 Ps. So define the purpose of the meeting. Consider who should be participating in the meeting. And then finally, what process are you going to use during that meeting? So we have a couple different slides here that go through reasons why you might have a meeting. The first one is brainstorming. This can be a little bit tricky. People can think of it as a time sink if you're not very explicit with what you want people to bring to the meeting. So it's always helpful to have people prep ahead of time. Make sure that you're capturing people's ideas too. So there's some kind of a visual, either stickies or something that people feel is a tangible demonstration of the time that they've spent brainstorming. And obviously, you need to follow up on those ideas that people bring. Sometimes you might have a meeting to just discuss an idea. I think a lot of meetings fall into this bucket. The trick here is to make sure that it's not a one-person show. So you're not doing all the discussing as a facilitator, or one of your participants isn't spending the entire hour monopolizing the agenda. So that is a very important piece to consider ahead of time, how you're going to move the discussion along, how you're going to avoid those monopolizers or debrief with them ahead of time. A good technique that I have seen used and I've used myself is to do a walk around the room and have every person in the room have a minute or two that they're called upon to contribute. Making decisions is another very popular purpose for a meeting. Make sure that you're thinking about this in a way that demonstrates respect for everybody's opinion and reflects group norms. Decision-making can be very, very tricky when you do it in a verbal method, especially if there are introverts in the room or people who are less comfortable speaking. So make sure you allow, again, time for people to ponder that decision, hopefully before the meeting. You're sending out, here's the things I want you to consider, here's the things we're going to be talking about, and then you provide alternate means of people to make that decision other than a verbal. And then to get things done. I mean, who doesn't like to get things done during meetings? I love the group wordsmithing. That can, I think some of the most notable horrific meetings that I've attended have been those where we're developing a charter or a policy. That can be a very, very tedious task. So make sure that if that's the purpose of your meeting, that you are very, very, very crisp with what you want to produce. Sometimes we want to share information with others. That's a very valid reason to have a meeting. But make sure that it's delivered in a way that people can actually utilize. So right now, there's a lot of buzz around actionable data. So data is something everybody's always looking to get their hands on. Especially lately, it's becoming a very, very hot topic and things to discuss. But if it's not presented in a way that's clearly understood, it's a big, big waste of time for people, and it can leave people feeling very frustrated. A good meeting facilitator has passion for their subject, and so being able to inspire people and bring that passion with you. If you don't have that passion, it's extremely hard to face or to convince people that they should be passionate. So make sure that your own batteries are charged when you come into that meeting, that you really, really believe in what you're bringing to the table. The last two are, you know, some people might roll their eyes a little bit at these. It can seem like not good use of work time, but I can tell you that building social capital really does reap big rewards. If people feel connected to a process or other people at the table, it definitely makes for more productive conversation. A little bit later, we'll talk more about how we can build a sense of team and to take some time out, even if it's a minute or two, to celebrate hard work people have put in or individual contributions. So strategies for defining purpose. So obviously, one of the most successful things that you can do in prepping for a meeting is to have a very, very well-constructed agenda and to send it out ahead of time. I always try to incorporate a mission statement or an outcome statement into the top of the agenda so it's front and center. People can't wander too far away from that. If they do, there's a visual reminder, or you can verbally say, let's go back to the mission. Look at every agenda item. A lot of times there is just artifacts on your agendas, especially if it's a regular meeting. So does that really need to be on this agenda? I encourage you to standard templates so people can easily follow the flow. They don't have to spend time looking around. Wait, what's this? How does this relate? I encourage people to always make sure that on the template, in addition to the members and then the mission statement, that there is some type of objective listed for each agenda item, how it relates back to the mission, what you hope to accomplish with that agenda item. I think that is also a very good way to vet any agenda items that are submitted by others. How does this relate to the goal we're trying to accomplish, and what do you want members to do with it?
So one of the things that has always been helpful is to think about your objectives in terms of, are we getting together to create a product or to increase knowledge? And if we're getting together to create a product, maybe that's a decision, maybe that's a plan, or maybe it's just a list of actions or ideas. So I know, I've been in meetings a million times where people don't know what we're trying to accomplish together. So instead of thoroughly talking through the problem, which is what we actually wanted to do in the meeting, we jump right into solutions. And by the time we leave, we realize we never thoroughly discussed what the actual problem was. So I think if people come to a meeting saying, hey, we're just trying to get a list of what people are thinking about this issue, that really helps frame and help people focus on the actual product you're trying to produce. And then it's okay to say, we're not coming together to create something. We're coming together to make sure that we have a shared understanding, or that staff has awareness about an issue, or to learn a particular skill. It's perfectly acceptable for your meeting not to have a physical, tangible outcome that you can touch or email to someone, but you just need to be explicit about the fact that gaining knowledge is the purpose of your meeting. So we also need to have the right people at the table. So some questions that you can ask yourself as a meeting facilitator around this are all the relevant perspectives adequately represented? So if we're talking about an issue that impacts the entirety of the staff, are the right staff members in the room in this meeting to have that discussion? Another question is, do participants have the time to be fully present? So I would say, if you schedule a meeting from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., maybe you should provide lunch, or maybe you should suggest that people bring their lunch to the meeting. And understand that, that's time where people have maybe considered that they would have a moment to themselves, whether it's to check email or take a walk or whatever. And also be cognizant, if you have people coming from back-to-back meetings, are they really going to be able to sit there and be present for the time that you need them to be present? Have you given people sufficient notice of the meeting and its objectives? So before they come, do people know what we're trying to accomplish together? And is it acceptable in your organization for participants to ask you as a facilitator, do you need me for this? Because sometimes it's okay for someone to be excused from the meeting. And if they're asking you, that also signals to you as the facilitator that you haven't communicated the purpose of the meeting well enough. So if you're thinking, obviously, yes, you need to be there, the problem is that this person hasn't understood what their purpose is or what their role is in this meeting, and wouldn't you want to know that? So building a culture where people can ask, what's my role in this meeting, is really helpful. Some specific strategies around getting the right people. Consider standing or walking meetings. Shelley threw the gauntlet down yesterday as we were finishing our slides and challenged me to think about having a walking meeting with more than 3 people. I don't know if it can be done. If anyone figures out a way to have a walking meeting with more than 3 people, please email us, because we will definitely want to highlight that in the future. But if it's a one-on-one meeting, maybe there's the first 20 minutes you could go for a quick walk, and then if you need to be in front of your computer, you can come back and do that. There's also huddles are in clinical sort of thinking about meetings really popular, and so we put some resources at the end of the slides about huddles. We've done a whole webinar through the Institute about huddles and scrubbing charts and how teams can help improve teamwork using those methods. So there's information about that at the end of the presentation. Like I said before, make objectives clear and provide an out. Make it acceptable for someone to question whether or not they need to participate. Pre-meetings are another way. So if there's someone you really need to get their perspective, you can meet with them beforehand, or maybe assign a meeting participant to meet with them afterwards to catch them up. Similarly, if you have someone who needs a lot of airtime consistently, have a pre-meeting with them. I kind of think of it as tiring them out a little bit, so that they can make sure their thoughts are heard, but then you can sort of summarize them up and crisp them up along with them for the meeting. It's important to consider varying schedules. If someone leaves at 4 and you have a standing meeting from 3:30 to 4, is that really going to work well for them? Do you really want to have 6 a.m. meetings just because that's when people are all available? And really be clear about the value of a meeting. People should be excited to come, so if they're not, maybe sit around and think about how to make people feel like they get something from the meeting. They learn things, they know things, they understand things, or they build relationships that they wouldn't get if they didn't have that meeting. And everyone, not just you as the facilitator, should feel like they're getting value from the group getting together. So the last P that we're going to talk about is to plan your process. That's a P squared, actually. So these are some road-tested strategies that Shelley and I have used among many. We're going to link to some resources at the end of this presentation that have a gazillion different ways that you can do that. So the first is talking chips. So you hand out cards or stickers or poker chips or whatever to participants when they come in. And encourage people to put a chip in the center of the table when they share a thought. This can be really helpful if you have folks who are really apt to participate and people who are really not apt to participate. It can kind of help even the scale, and just the physical act of handing over a token for sharing a thought helps those who participate a lot recognize the amount they're participating versus their colleagues. There's also something called fist to five, which is a way to gauge level of agreement and understanding from a group. And again, these are all links. So in the PDF that will be posted later today, these will take you to more information about how to do these facilitation methods. But fist to five is a way for you to gauge a group's feeling on a subject. Do we need to talk about this more? Do we already all agree about this? You know, you ask folks to raise their hands above their head with a fist, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And 5 is, you know, someone's religiously enthusiastic into this idea. And 1 is, I will go along with this just barely because I really don't like it. And the fifth is, I'm really having a hard time with this and don't agree that we should do this. The next is 6 thinking hats. So tip of the hat to Krista Collins from OPCA, who led a breakout session about this at our last TA network session. But it's a method that helps participants think about an issue from a variety of perspectives. So when you need to break people out of their normal routine of thinking about things from a certain way, the 6 thinking hats can help make sure that issues are explored from a variety of perspectives.
And I'm a very visual person, so I really favor using sticky notes or dot voting whenever possible, especially, again, considering there are many, many people who don't prefer to talk about something verbally and would prefer to write something down. This is also, again, a great way for people to see production or some kind of output from a meeting. At a recent larger meeting that we had, we plotted an impact versus feasibility chart on one of the walls and had people come up with stickies and note quadrants for things. It's a very easy way also for decision making and consensus forming. And then I do plus delta at the end of every meeting. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, it's just a quick reflection at the end of a meeting. It doesn't have to take more than a few minutes, where people can give feedback about anything, about how well the agenda was constructed, about whether the facilitator did a good job keeping the meeting on pace. Honestly, it's wide open for any kind of comment. And don't be surprised if in the beginning there's not a lot of people who want to say something or feel comfortable saying something, but I've seen this get modeled over time, and it ends up being a very productive exercise, and it allows you to learn something every time you have the meeting.
All right, we're pulling the curtain back, and it is meeting time. So you'll notice the longest part of our presentation was about before the meeting, because as Shelley pointed out before, that's probably the most important act. It really sets the stage. I really love that, that we got that pun. That's really great. Sorry, I'm using myself. So Act 2 is during the meeting. So while you really set yourself up for success in the planning portion, there are really important things that you need to do to make sure that the actual meeting itself goes really well. The first is to engage people. You'll notice there's a poll on the right-hand side about what ground rules or group agreements you've seen work well. So we'll have folks go to that poll everywhere link in a minute to answer that. But you want to establish meeting roles in each meeting, and whether that's set roles or whether or not you sort of switch those up and assign them at the start of a meeting. Someone's facilitating, someone's scribing, and someone's keeping time. And these aren't all one person. So I've noticed a lot of times facilitators try and lead a meeting and also take notes. And you'll notice some of the ideas we have shared around making sure people are engaged involve scanning the room as a facilitator, looking, are people falling asleep? Are they checking their cell phones? Are they doodling and not, well, doodling may not mean that they're not listening to you, but you need to be able to read the room and see if you have people with you, and it's really hard to do that if you're writing things down at the same time. On the flip side, we've said people want to see the progress of the meeting, so have another person get up and scribe. That's a really great way to engage participants in the process, and it also helps make sure that you get the notes from the meeting that you need. And then everyone loves to be the timekeeper. People love, there is one in every meeting who really wants it to go on schedule and will happily remind everyone when there's a 5-minute warning or when we're going over time. So find that person and engage them that way. Then there's creating ground rules or group agreements. Again, that might be something that you do at the start of each meeting, or maybe you have a set of ground rules that you establish. You laminate the poster and you hang it up in your meeting room. This can be helpful. Some people might think it's wishy-washy, but it can also help you have a coaching conversation with your peers if someone is doing something in meetings that's really violating a group agreement. So it's something that you can refer to during a meeting to try and course correct that, or maybe later say, hey, look, we have these group agreements or these rules in meetings, and I noticed this, to try and maybe deal with some of the different meeting characters that you will meet in your meeting. So hopefully folks have had the chance to hop on the poll and share some ideas about group agreements. Let's take a look and see. Oh no, we couldn't find that poll. Oh no. All right. Well, we will. I think maybe we had a technical glitch. So if you did answer that poll, I know we're getting answers. I think maybe the little widget that connects it to the PowerPoint just broke. But we'll collect all those ideas and we'll email them out to folks afterwards, because I'm sure people have some good ideas about group agreements. So I mentioned briefly there are meeting characters. There are heroes and there are villains among your meeting participants. So your heroes may be people who are shy but really thoughtful and actively participating in the meeting, but just feel scared to or intimidated to speak out. There's the people who are really creative, who are like, yeah, let's do this. And so they bring a lot of great energy to meetings and can be really engaged. And then there are people who are really inclusive, who will, if they see another meeting participant, even if they're not facilitating the meeting, if they see someone's not understanding, or that maybe the group has different understandings of the same topic, they'll say, well, what do I think I heard you say? Or they'll ask a question to clarify something on behalf of the whole group. So these are your meeting heroes, and you want to support them and make sure they know that you don't think that they're a Budinsky, but that they are actually really helping to facilitate the meeting. And then there are the meeting villains. They monopolize. They shoot down every idea that everyone has. They can't brainstorm because everything is impossible. And or they ask questions not because they actually don't think something's a good idea or will work, but just because they want to play, quote unquote, the devil's advocate, which is often a real big derailer in meetings. So there's on the last slide a really great article about how to handle some of these different personalities, but you'll certainly meet a lot of characters in your meeting.
And I just want to jump in. I think that the naysayer is probably, I think there's one in every meeting. And it can be particularly challenging if it's a regular meeting. I led a meeting for 2 hours every Monday morning for a year and a half, and there were 25 people in this meeting. It was quite an adventure that we took preparing for electronic medical record implementation. Lots to talk about, lots of angst and change, anxiety, and I came to dread these meetings for this one particular naysayer that I knew was very verbal and was always going to shut down everybody's ideas. And eventually I had to have a side conversation with her. There's just nothing else you can do. I think it's very akin to that one school child in every school teacher's class that's so terrible. You know, there's one in every class. I was probably that person. But I did have an intervention with this particular person, and I worked very hard to ask what her concerns were ahead of time and to talk those through with her so she wouldn't necessarily bring them to the meeting and bring things to a grinding halt, as she liked to do.
So just a quick PSA to practice what you preach. So help the facilitator. If you see someone trying to facilitate and take notes, hop up and start writing down the list that they're trying to keep on the whiteboard, or offer to help keep time. Try and limit your own distractions so you're not this person in this picture. Remember the group agreements and refer back to them. And if you attend a regular meeting that needs some help as a participant, volunteer to meet with the facilitator, or maybe send them a recording of this webinar. Maybe that's kind of passive-aggressive, I don't know. But there are ways as a participant that you can help reflect some of these values, even if you're not leading a meeting.
Okay, here comes the fun. I told you it was coming. I am a very hard worker, but I tend to believe that everything can be infused with fun, even the most serious of topics. I've had really pleasurable experiences at meetings where I came in thinking, oh, this is really weird. I inherited a large consortium that had been meeting for several years, 25, 30 people again at this meeting, and the first time I attended, I watched them do a kudos at the beginning of the meeting, and the facilitator would open up the floor, and everybody knew what was going on, what was expected, and people would highlight other members of the group for doing something in between a meeting that they thought was really notable. And then the facilitator would throw that person a chocolate bar, and it was hilarious. But it was amazing how excited people got. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do this. This is so hokey. But I can't tell you how much fun it ended up being. And it really was just a very, very quick, probably 5 minutes of the first agenda. And I think it got people there on time, and it set the tone for the rest of the meeting, especially when we were discussing some pretty sticky topics. So I appreciated that lesson. I've also, with teams that have regular meetings, just getting to know something personal about somebody. One time we had an exercise where we asked people ahead of the meeting to send a photo of their favorite thing in the world, and every meeting we'd show a different picture at the beginning, and it was so interesting to get insights into people. You know, some were like a picture of some food, you know, like a fettuccine Alfredo, and some were pictures of a beautiful waterfall, or some were pictures of people's children. So it was really nice. I think everybody enjoyed that. I've also been to meetings where everyone was started with a hilarious YouTube video. I don't know where they found these, but every time it was hilarious. It was a minute or two, and there was nothing worse than showing up late for the meeting and coming in, and everybody's laughing, and you have no idea why. So that was a really effective means of getting people there, and again, setting the mood. And finally, toys. I have one more little thing I was going to sorry. Toys. Come on, can't forget the toys. Definitely not for every meeting. You really have to be careful to use these only when it's appropriate, and it's usually best for longer meetings. But toys, again, as crazy as it sounds, there really has been a lot of research that show that they diffuse anxiety. They can promote creativity, provides a mental break again for those longer sessions. And it engages the whole person. It's another sense of tactile sense and a visual sense that's employed. And I had to show this picture of this pipe cleaner bicyclist that my husband did, who is a nerdy scientist guy, like never knew he had a creative bone in his body, and he produced this during a meeting, and he claims to have been very engaged the entire meeting. So I think people can surprise you during meetings when you give them some of these tools. So the end of the meeting, I would say, is almost as important as the beginning of the meeting. Again, it's a very circular path if you have regular meetings. But capturing the action items is key, absolutely key. Making sure that there is a defined owner and a timeline and an expectation that this is going to be revisited at the beginning of your next meeting. That I think if there's one thing to take away, make sure there is at least one action item at the end of your meeting. And again, evaluate. Take that opportunity, take that minute or two when you're with your peers to get a better understanding of how you could do better as a facilitator and plan the next agenda.
All right, for our encore, it's the end of the play, and we in our talking about this, realized that some meetings or no meetings at all. So we've got, everyone's in the same time, the same place, having meetings. There's same time, but people are in different places, like we are right now. So this is a virtual meeting. There's a different time, same place. So maybe there's a place that your team is regularly hangs out. Maybe it's a kitchen, maybe it's a break room. Are there opportunities to communicate messages via bulletin boards or mailboxes? And different time and different place, send an email about it. But we're curious, and hopefully this poll works, what are other meeting alternatives you use in your organization? So what are things that you do in your organization that help people communicate with one another that don't involve going to meetings? And I think this one may work, so let's see who is quickest to get. It's the same link as before. You have to copy and paste it into your web browser and share with us what meeting alternatives do you use in your organization. I was just waving my hands in a victory, technological victory number 2 today. So it's poll everywhere 1, PCPCI staff 2. So yeah, that's not bad. So quick stand up on Tuesday mornings for brief updates, online lunch learning, Google Hangouts, one-on-one meetings, a visual management board.
I see, yeah, a lot of lean processes here.
Awesome. Keep your ideas coming. Feel free to share more if you have them, and we'll collect these and share them out with the group.
I think the stand-ups are a theme here. The team huddles. Honestly, a standing meeting is incredibly popular, especially if it's just a quick touch base with people.
Yeah, I worked for an organization, I won't name names, but we used to have a 1-hour-long staff meeting every single Monday. And it was first thing in the morning, so you were literally just orienting yourself to your life. And so it was really hard to get really engaged in the staff meeting. And so we decided to just peel all those off and do 15 minutes updates. We have a whiteboard in the hallway that maybe I'm giving away what organization it was. We have a whiteboard in the hallway where we take notes about what happened in the huddle. So if you missed it, you were sick that day or whatever, you still get the benefit of what everyone talked about. But no one has to open a Word document and take notes and email them out. It's something that you walk by every day. You can casually read it while you're heating up your lunch. So definitely have seen that be effective for sure. All right, so now is your time to shine. So hopefully some of you thought about a meeting that you have, and we went through all these different tips and tricks on how to have great meetings, and hopefully that produced some idea for you that you might apply to your meeting that you thought about in the beginning of the webinar. Now remember, you have to enter in your audio PIN in order for us to be able to unmute your line. But if you've entered your audio PIN and you have an idea to share, go ahead and raise your hand. You'll see the little arrow pointing to the hand icon on your screen. Go ahead and raise your hand. Marissa will announce your name, your first name, and unmute you so you can share any insights that you had during the meeting today. So there's no hands raised yet. Everyone's feeling shy this morning. I am hopeful that there will be a brave soul or two or three. Or if you want to ask your question, you can also type it in. So maybe if you're, sitting on the MAX train in Portland, or, sitting in your house and your dog's barking and you don't want to get online, you can also type it in, type in any insights, and we will share them over the, Marissa will read them for you.
So the first question we have is from Ariel Goranson, and she is interested in finding out more tips around engaging meeting attendees when facilitating brainstorming type of meetings occur, and when there's a broader concept or problem that you're looking to solve.
So I can share an idea, and then maybe Shelley, I'm sure Shelley has one too. So I'd say, when concepts are broad, you want to make sure that people have a good orientation to what you're talking about so everyone can equally contribute. You don't want to set someone up to be that person in a meeting who says something that's totally not at all what you're talking about. And when things are really conceptual, that can easily happen. So maybe provide a case study or an example of something to really get people grounded in what you're talking about. The other thing is that there's this book called Game Storming that I use pretty much all the time. And there's a link to it, or a note about it at the end of this presentation. I'd also highly recommend that, because it has a gazillion ways to think about brainstorming that go beyond just writing ideas up on the board, that can really get people engaged in different ways.
And I happen to know Ariel, and I know what an intelligent, creative person you are. So I think that oftentimes there can be a challenge in trying to take a very complex concept and breaking it down for people who aren't immersed in it day to day. Ariel has been the beneficiary of some of my kind of unconventional meetings. But I would say I completely agree with Kate's comments, and I think case studies or stories can be especially helpful. And I also really appreciated the learnings from the book Switch, and talking about the elephant and the rider and how to motivate the elephant. And really, if you can't, if it's difficult to explain your concept, you can try infusing some passion or some demonstration of what the impact of that is. And so you really get to the emotional core of people. That's another suggestion.
I'm ever hopeful there's a brave soul who wants to speak up that has raised their hand. Oh, no brave souls today. All right, no one wants to make my heart sore, but there is another question.
The next question is from Oliver Droppers, and he was wondering, how do you minimize the use of texting and smartphones during meetings?
Oh, the ever-present. Shelley, do you have some ideas?
Other than calling it out, I'm not shy in asking people to put away their phones and their laptops during meetings. I have been in organizational cultures where everybody has their computer in the meeting and open, and they're typing, and you have no idea if they're taking notes about what you're talking about or if they're multitasking. Personally, I have no problem asking people to put those things aside and calling them out when they do. If there's somebody that is waiting for an important call or a message, then asking them to step out of the room when they use their phone, I think, is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I'd say group agreements are really helpful, because if it's the group's notion that we want to be focused, then it makes it easier to call it out. And I know for myself as a meeting participant, I'm a distracted Sally. So if I bring my computer to a meeting and I try and take notes on that computer, my colleagues will attest pretty soon I'll be typing the answers to an email. And it's not because I have bad intentions or I think the meeting's unimportant. I am just distracted easily. Similarly, I also do think that if everyone's engaged in something else, it could be just because the group hasn't agreed to sort of put things away and focus, but it could also be because they feel like they don't need to be there. And so if there's someone who is coming to meetings but routinely doing other things, maybe have a conversation with them about whether they're, what value are they finding in their participation in the meeting, and maybe there's some different meeting strategies you can use. You know, when people are generating ideas on sticky notes as part of the meeting, or playing a game as part of the meeting, it's really hard to be on your computer and not kind of look like a jerk. So there may be some ways that as a facilitator you can set it up so it's hard to use those behaviors or talk to people directly about them. But it's a thing that plagues our culture in many ways. Other questions, thoughts, reflections before we move on and talk about some resources that you can access in your off time? All right, I'm going to move on to the resources, but if there are questions or people who want to share over the phone line, we'd be happy to take them after we do that. Or type them into the questions pane in GoToWebinar. We have capable assistants standing by ready to make your voice heard and be your proxy. So the first two things are what I call mega rich resources, because they're actually resources about resources. It's one of these. So the first is from ARC. They have a patient-centered medical home curriculum, and they have a curriculum specifically for practice facilitators. So those are folks in coaching roles with clinics, and they have a whole module on how to run effective meetings, because you really should be able to do that. If you're a practice facilitator and you're trying to facilitate changes in teams, you really have to be good at it, but also how you create capacity for practices that you may work with to run effective meetings. So this might be helpful for folks who aren't working directly in a practice, but maybe work with a group of practices and give you some real insights in how to train, you know, sort of a train the trainer. The second is around scrubbing and huddling. So there's a webinar, a really great webinar that features some medical assistants talking about how scrubbing and huddling charts really changed the teamwork in their clinic. But there are also, if you search the Institute website for huddles, there are checklists, there are videos, there are training materials on doing huddles. So please do access those resources. Ooh. That is the sound of a technology fail. One moment. Okay, I think we're back, maybe. So then there are some other resources that you can use. Some quick reads up here from the University of Oregon, tips for walking meetings, and then the 7 dangerous meeting personalities and how you keep them on track. So again, these aren't hyperlinked in here, so if you're trying to click your screen, I'm so sorry to disappoint you. But they will be linked in the PDF version that we post later today. And then to the right are some books, Game Storming, the one I mentioned already, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and then Visual Meetings and Visual Teams, which both have really, really great ideas about how to think of things in a more visual way to engage people like Shelley and myself. And then Shelley also mentioned the book Switch, which I have also read and has lots of great insights that you might want to access as well. Shelley, I don't know if you had any concluding thoughts?
Nope, nothing from me.
Also, all right, many thanks to you for participating in the webinar. If there are any other questions, we can take them now. And if not, we would just love for you to complete the post-webinar survey after the end of this presentation. That's our plus delta. So we'd love to hear what you liked and what you thought could be better. And we hope to have you on a future Institute webinar.